I'm sure you'll go. We're streaming on YouTube.
Check, check. Perfect. Thank you. Hello, Karen Gravel. Thank you all for being here today. We just started our live stream. We've got one handheld microphone, so if you have questions and things, let's try and put it into the microphone as much as possible so people who are watching online can hear as well and can participate. But thank you all for coming across the street. Are there still a good many people over there? Do we need to do a sweep? Okay, I'll go across the street. Okay, no.
Should I go ahead and start? Okay. All right, we have a lot of material to get through today. I'm really excited to be back here. Just to remind everyone, I am a part of a larger team that includes Garbett Construction. Sean Moxley's here today from Garbett, and then we have a couple of architects that work with me, as well as engineers who have worked on the project since May when we last met. When we met then, we talked about the process, and at that time we were in the middle of beginning and completing a condition assessment, as well as meeting with the congregation. I'm going to stop right now and say we do have a handout, and this is an abbreviated version of what you'll see today. It's got the highlights for you to take home and digest as you will. But right now we're in the middle of finalizing our recommendations for the master plan. We are not done. This is a draft. It's here. We're here to receive input and comments and whatever you all have to say about what we've gone through over the past summer. So, since we last met, we have conducted our condition assessment. We have also worked through several programming studies for both buildings. We've developed scopes of work based on the condition assessment and based on the programming studies that we've worked on. As Katie mentioned, and the whole service today was centered around the 221 years of life of this church, and I was trying to think in my head, if you count 30 years per generation, that's at least 7, if not more, generations of people who have been in this church, and that's an incredible history, and we're excited to be a part of it. As you all know, the church has grown and changed over time at specific intervals. This is how the church looked when it was built early on, and sorry about that, this is just a little sensitive. And now this is the church that we see today, that it's been like this since 1921-22. So if you can imagine, we're in a structure that's essentially been the same with some modifications for the last 100 years, and that's pretty incredible. Our condition assessment focused on a variety of things. It focused on the materiality of the building, accessibility, life safety, making sure that we were thinking about any code implications. We looked at the restrooms. We also looked at the character-defining features, because this building, along with the education center, are integral pieces of the Savannah landscape. They contribute to the historic district, and they are really anchors to Chippewa Square. We also looked at the existing structure, noting any things that were deficient with that. So I'm going to briefly go through the different conditions we looked at. Austin Ziegler with Garbett Construction also flew a drone around the roof and the roof line so that we could get an updated look at things that you all have already heard about in the past. This image is of the roof. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail here, but as you can see, there's a lot. This is a good image because it shows a lot of things. The kind of biological growth that happens on the building quite often, In Savannah, that's just something that we deal with a lot. These little things that stick out at the cornice line are called modillions. You had a chunk fall off of one of them, and a whole study that was done in 2018 about fixing those. We've looked at that and think that's a priority of something to fix. You've got the integral gutter, which is above here, which is just a simple word, is just a gutter that you all lined in the last couple of years that has actually stopped a lot of deterioration, which is good. And then we've got the tile roof. This is a Ludowici tile. That's a term for a company that makes ceramic tile. And so we'll talk about all those components as we go. Here's an image of where the tile on the roof, this is on actually above us over here, where the tile, you can see how it's been fixed over time. You can see the integral gutter that has been lined. This is really the only place where we've seen a lot of intervention on the tile to fix it. There are other places where it's missing in places, not missing, but kind of ajar a little bit. But in general, the roof is in good condition. The tile actually is still made by Ludowici, which is fascinating. Normally you can't find things like this anymore. But we did talk with their people, and if we need replacement tile, that's easily done. We looked all the way around the church and the education building. We looked at the accessibility on the streets. We looked at the exterior materials. One thing that I don't know if everyone knows, but this building is made, the exterior cladding is a man-made stone, and it's got a porous and very delicate mixture to the way the stones were made. Whoops, sorry about that. And so what we did is we mapped all the cracks that we could find, which weren't a whole lot. We looked at the joints that are between each of these man-made stones. We looked at the downspouts. We looked at a lot of things on both of the buildings. All the windows, we looked at those in pretty good detail. We looked at all the doors. Several of the doors could use some restoration. I think we've identified one to be replaced. This is a closer look at some of the cracks that are already happening that you're already monitoring on the Baptist. There's a crack, as well as try to get up close and personal with each of these modillions. So we feel like we've done pretty comprehensive condition assessment to become aware of things that you already knew about and also point out additional cracks and deteriorated mortar joints. This is one image of one of the wing walls on the side, and if you compare this stone with the stone that's on the building, these wing walls have more cracking and hairline cracking, I think because they are standalone objects that are so thin, but that's just something to be noted that we've taken a look at. The windows, if you look at the historic images of this building, these windows look like they are very close to the originals, if not the originals that have been repaired over time. There's a lot of glazing, and when I say glazing compound, I mean you got the glass, and then there's a wood mutton, and whatever holds that glass into the frame, it's kind of a putty substance that's called glazing putty, and in many instances, the glazing putty is coming out. So that's one thing that needs to be addressed at some point. I don't think they're leaking, but in general, they're still here, they're in decent shape, but they do need some restoration work. We've looked at all the ironwork around the building. Some of this needs to be scraped and painted, as well as the steel handrails on the side of the building. I wanted to note from an accessibility standpoint, there were questions about the ramp on this side of the building being accessible, and actually it was built in 1988, and that was 3 years before this Americans with Disability Act came out. And to my surprise, it's the right rise, it's the right run, it's the right configuration for that area. So we've recommended just leaving that ramp alone, repaint the guardrails, it gets you to the building, and that's actually a really good way to get in. When you start to look at all the other different ways to get in, that's actually a really good design solution. So as I said, we looked at all the entrances, we looked at the windows, and For the lower part of the building, you have storm windows that are on the outside of the windows at that level, which I think is the first barrier for any flooding issues. Those windows could stand to be painted and caulked, as well as all the joints between the infills at each of these window wells. This is a lot of deferred maintenance type things, which aren't high dollar, but it's just interesting to note that those are in pretty good shape. I think in general, I would say that our approach and recommendations regarding flooding, we asked our engineers if there was a way that we could add any more sump pumps to the basement, or is there anything other that we should do mechanically, and their recommendation was that you just really need to treat it as a resilience project. Know that it will flood every so often, make sure that the finishes at the lower level are going to be, can survive a flood, but there's no way of controlling it. So at this point, don't try to spend a bunch of money trying to put pumps in the basement. Just live on. We looked at the attic space. There were a lot of questions about trusses 11 and 12, and I think I don't know if you can see my pointer, but they are in this general location. There are 2 trusses, I believe, that are steel trusses that have been identified in previous studies as being underperforming. Truss 11, we had asked an engineer that had worked with you on the rest of the, 10 years ago, you all had a truss reinforcement project, and these 2 trusses were not addressed at that time. So we went back to that same engineer and asked what we needed to do with this truss, and he basically told us we needed to reinforce it with a similar size truss. So what you see in the documentation, we have a budget number for that to reinforce that truss. That truss is rather complicated, though, because it's right next to an organ chamber, that if you get into the organ chamber, then it makes sense to do work with the organ at that time, too. So the truss work is somewhat married to the roof work, and that once the truss is reinforced, and if there's any movement with that, then that needs to happen with more work to the roof. So all of this will make sense in a few minutes, but I'm just trying to go through the many different things that we looked at and considered along the way. The sanctuary, with the exception of some pews that have some damage, is in generally good condition. We didn't focus on this a lot except to look at the choir loft and the chancel area. That was a topic of a lot of design studies and, not to quote today, but a lot of imagination. We looked at handrails and stairs, and there's one stair that goes from the narthex down to the lower level. There's a lot of questions about whether we should reconfigure that. We think that the carpet might be contributing to it being slippery, so finding another finish for that, as well as having a different handrail that's perhaps a little more continuous. This one is continuous, but it's more difficult to navigate. There's not a lot of geometry in that ante or foreroom to really change it, and it is a historic configuration, so we're recommending to leave that and modify it in simpler ways. As everybody has probably experienced, the choir loft has a very small guardrail. This is 17 inches, and my finger right here is at 42 inches, which is a standard guardrail. So I don't know how everyone got. Just stay away from this rail, please. We've made. I'll show you a whole design study that we've done to help bring this size up, and then put a simple rail on the top. If there's, I would consider putting a rail on this if there's going to be a long lag time before any work would happen to the choir loft. But it is, it's a little dangerous right now. We looked at accessibility from once you go down the ramp and then you enter into the vestibule and then you come up in the lift. We looked at, asked the question, can we put a larger elevator in that space and make it a little more hospitable for people? And so we're showing that. This elevator is working okay. It just floods, and as you all know, and that will not lead to long-term viability for this lift. The bathrooms are not accessible. They are also, the fixtures are at the end of their serviceable life. We looked at the bottom level and how it could be used in ways that would have more programmatic needs, as well as the history room. As far as the education building is concerned, I don't know how many of you all were here in 1974 when the Tom Austin and there was a major renovation of this building, closed up a lot of the windows. From what I understand, the building was brick, and now it's stucco over the brick. We looked at that, looked at the roof. The roof's in fairly good shape. The downspouts are a little rusted out at this point. But what we did was we mapped all the cracks. There's beginning to be a lot of cracks on the exterior stucco. So we did a mapping exercise of that. We looked at the windows and the entrances. One of the entrances, we talked about a project that may come up sooner than later to make this entrance more accessible. Right now, the door hardware is not very accessible, and there's no way to get a wheelchair in there. So we've looked at that. This image shows a lot of that cracking that's happening in this facade. The existing windows are a single pane aluminum frame window. They have some wood trim around the exterior that's beginning to fail, and you can see the evidence of that around the entire frame. When we looked at the education building and laid out some ideas and imagined, we also kind of acknowledged that we had a lot of historic fabric in certain places, meaning the kind of the old Sunday school rooms or offices with transoms. So in any of the plans that you see, we've tried to maintain that little bit of historic fabric that's left because it helps it feel like a Sunday school building, so no matter what it's used for in the future. The addition, done in 1997, houses a lot of the equipment. There were some places where we saw a lot of water infiltration, so paying attention to the roof. It doesn't seem to be leaking now, and that's been repaired, but that's kind of something to keep track of. And also the bathrooms in the education building are not accessible either. So there's a whole range of restroom renovations that I think we could talk 3 days on the restroom renovations alone. The good news in the education building is that there are 2 stair towers. Usually in buildings like this, we only see 1. So there's already 2 means of egress all the way up both sides of the building. So that's nice. So that gets through the kind of condition assessment piece of the 2 buildings. We began, once we had existing plans in our system, we verified what all the existing programs were in each building, and then we began to look at each structure and understand how much it was being utilized. We looked at this building in particular with the public versus private spaces, and when I say that, I mean the church would be private space or the church space versus any spaces that the general public would be interacting with, and seeing how when people come into the structure, how they relate to it. We did look through all your discernment process from 2017, and then we started to define potential future needs and brainstorming. Used a lot of imagination. So on the existing spaces, this is rather bleached out, but we did go through a diagramming exercise, and I'll have to say this is a part of a larger report that we will finish. We have all the condition assessment and recommendations in our report now. We need to describe each of the kind of phases and ultimate recommendations in that now, but we were pretty analytical about reviewing what you have. For example, this is a space utilization plan. You don't need to know which each of this is the floor plan for the education building, but the strong orange shows you all the places that are not being used that much or underutilized. And when you start to think about it, it's just a lot of space not being used. And so we had to ask ourselves, well, how can we reorganize that space? How much space does the church need? And then what can that space be in the future? We also looked at, this is an image of the church sanctuary building that we're in now, where we diagram existing spaces of the lower level and the upper level. And then we started to look, well, where's the public versus private that I mentioned just previously? For example, you have a lot of people coming into the bathrooms that may be in the public or not associated with the church or something. So one goal that we had was to move bathrooms, if they're already inaccessible at the end of their life, move them closer to the front of the building where it would make more sense for the public interaction with the bathrooms. So that just gives you a glimpse into kind of the analysis that architects do. Might not totally make sense, but it's just the way we process information. This is another space utilization. It's a little blanched out, but shows that there's some underutilized space in the lower level of this building, and to try to start thinking about, well, what is the order of magnitude of that and what it can be in the future. So from there, we reviewed all of our analysis with church staff, and then we started to dream about this building and what could it become. And if we could bring programs from the education building into this building, what would those be and what would they look like? Our process was meeting once a week. We would present ideas, multiple ideas, and then we would talk through them, vetting our way through to the place where we came up with at least one floor plan. And so this is and you have these in your packet too, so if it's hard to read on the screen, you can follow along with me. This is the lower level of this building. We maintain a large gathering area in the lower level, but we also add code-compliant bathrooms that are accessible to the front of the building via a new elevator or the existing stair, and are accessible to your history gallery and provide additional space for gallery wall real estate closer to the front of the building. There was a desire to have a bridal suite with an attached restroom. We've included that, as well as bringing the choir and choir robing over to this building. That would enable all of that to be here and to not have to go back across the street when it's raining. So simple things, but having the ability to gather with the choir here on the lower level, and then having an area for the children's space in this building, which I think you all have taken steps in that direction already. Also, I want to mention that this building, we had a whole host of engineers, and we can bring out the engineering reports too. But one thing that came out of that is that there is an opportunity to get you off. Right now the church is on city water. Cold water that comes into the mechanical system basically provides the chilled water for the mechanical system. If we can put a interior chiller, and those things do exist with exhaust through a window, that would help decouple you from that system and save a lot of money on your monthly water bills. Wasn't it upwards of $5,000 a month on water alone, too? So anyway, but what that means is taking over some space in the first floor of this building to address the existing mechanical. In the sanctuary, we have looked extensively at the choir loft, how to make it more accessible. And when I say accessible, we're not going to provide an elevator to the choir loft, but providing stairs that are not scary and meet code, and people can walk up with handrails and two of them, so that if there's a fire, there's two means of egress from the choir loft. So we've basically shown the choir loft coming out to past this first window, and we have some renderings to show that right now. But that will take away the first 3 rows. We've eaten into the first 3 rows of the sanctuary. And also having an expanded chancel that doesn't have the ins and outs of this one. It would maintain the pulpit and the lectern, but just having it be more usable for multiple functions, concerts, recitals, book readings, all things like that. And this is an image of that expanded choir loft that will give you added capacity and added safety I think we were up to 45 people, Justin. Can't remember exactly, but it would also require the console for the organ to come forward, which you'll see later why we have that kind of tied with the organ work. And then we had a lot of debates about whether this elevator should go to the 3rd floor, and we believe due to the equipment up there. And anybody with a bum leg can help get into the elevator and go all the way up. So right now we're dreaming big and taking the elevator to the 3rd floor. This is an image of the sanctuary that we're in right now. I probably don't need to show this, but we did do some studies and renderings of what that expanded choir loft would look like. Maybe a little difficult to read, but this is essentially bringing this whole wall forward. This window right here is that window right there. This is also in your packet that you can look at later. We've brought the baptistry forward. We've have 2 doors on either side that then lead to 2 stairs that get you up into the choir loft. And then Kaylee got crazy and wanted to show it at Christmas time, so you can see it fully decked out as well. The Christmas tree still fit, and we've planned for places for audio visual as well that are not detracting to the whole architecture here. So moving on to the education building, we thought a lot about this building. We brainstormed and imagined about how can you use the existing space that you have. It seems like there's a lot of space that's not being used. We thought about many different types of programs, but we started with really a basic concept of let's hold the 1st and 2nd floors of the education building for the church use. Keep the 1st floor as church offices, keep the fellowship as it is. Y'all might have experienced today, we think there might be an opportunity with the Lewis Fellowship Hall right now we're showing this little storage room going away and opening this up more so there's visual connection between the fellowship hall and the back courtyard. Providing ADA accessible restrooms, and what we've got several different versions that we went through on this as well, but right now we've landed on 4 individual restrooms, gender neutral, increasing the size of the foyer, and then having the offices generally line the exterior wall. The 2nd floor, we thought of this, we keep your classrooms as they are because you're going to need some sort of space, and it's hard to predict how the church is going to rise and fall with people and classrooms, but then we looked at, well, how can you create a space for church groups or other mission groups or service groups to come and stay with you, worship with you? And so we created an area where we've got showers and restrooms, 2 showers for men and women, differentiated sleeping areas and a lounge, with really thinking through it as a youth group coming to stay with you from, I don't know, Kenosha, Wisconsin or something. But that's general idea with that floor. But it lets you know how big those things are, what do they look like, how much do they cost. So the 3rd and the 4th floors, we thought we have many different studies that we did of these floors. We looked at offices, we looked at shared offices, closed offices. We looked at different types of living arrangements, anything from like an Airbnb scenario to a kind of single rooms with combined kitchen scenario to apartments for longer term use. We landed at a place where we think, well, we asked ourselves, how many units could you get out of this building at each level? How much would that bring in revenue? What would that look like? It seemed like a longer term place for people to stay would be more acceptable from a lot of different perspectives. So right now we have both floors with 1 and 2 bedroom apartments shown that could help generate income. The good news is because there's 2 sets of stairs, 1 set of stairs could be used for their entrance and they can access the elevator as well, depending on how the 1st floor is configured. So we've looked through that. And also the courtyard space. This is a great area, y'all were just there. We think it might be nice to consider, there is a nice fountain there, but trying to use more of that space for a children's area rather than the fountain, opening up the area between the fellowship hall and the outdoor space so that you can see more between the two areas, have a place for food trucks, have a place for the children's area. This is not showing play equipment, but the vision would be to have a different play thing that's more better kind of shown in that area, and moving the trash over by the fence. Right here. So we were also asked about parking. So we went through a design exercise where we actually took the whole block, not that it's for sale or anything, but your block is right here with the parking, and we took that whole area and tried to see if you could put a parking deck or parking garage in that space, and it doesn't fit. The geometry just does not work. We tried to make it work, but given the zoning for Savannah and the need for first floor retail, now you can't get the parking deck ramps to even get to where you need to be. So right now we're recommending looking at the existing parking and repaving it with permeable pavers, making it an accessible material. Right now, the gravel, it's hard for anybody who is in a wheelchair to actually navigate from there to here. So using a different paving system would also clean it up and give you one or two more parking spaces as well. So we came up with all these ideas and all these plans and many different versions, and we asked Garbett Construction to price them. And so they went through a pricing exercise, and at the same time we asked the staff of the church to walk through their priorities, because we knew once they started seeing how much all this costs that we would need to figure out, well, what are the priorities? And I wanted to make sure it was clear in everybody's mind, what are we really here for? And the main things that came to the top were accessibility, meaning handicap accessibility, but accessibility in all ways, worship and the kind of focus on that, and formation. I'm not going to speak any further to those because that's not my department, but I will say that we asked them to do their homework, and they did, and that helped us clarify what we were proposing. And so as a part of this whole exercise, we took all the various components and pulled them out into 10 or 12 different components, and you've got this in your package as well. The sanctuary, we have the exterior scope. We've actually divided the exterior up in two pieces. We've got the entire first floor with the ADA elevator. We've got the choir loft, and then the organ with the truss work. And we've combined those into those specific scopes. At the education building, to make it digestible, we divided it by the exterior scope, all 4 floors, and then we brought out the courtyard and the parking lot as 2 scopes of work. So this was how we began to kind of figure out how we put this puzzle back together. So we came up with a 4-phase plan. We could have come up with a 2-phase plan. We could have come up with a 17-phase plan, but this was the plan that made sense to us based on numbers, based on work scopes, based on what priorities were at certain periods of time. The first phase is really looking at this building, talking about the accessibility with the elevator, the entire first floor, and addressing the key things on the exterior that need to be addressed right now, which we feel as though are the modillions, and making sure that those are repaired so they don't fall off anymore. We're holding the roof and the roof trusses to a later phase or in the progression, and I'll explain that in a minute, but that is kind of the first phase that we're talking about. Second phase, we jump over to the education building, and we look at the third and the fourth floors. This is an opportunity really to start to create income, to bring that income really to your church and find a way to make that a positive in the scheme of things. There is a lot of cracking on the exterior, that the cracks are wide and open, and we felt like that was more pressing than some of the basic maintenance that needed to happen on this building. The third phase, we have kind of glumped together the choir loft, the truss work, and the roof repair, because they're all interrelated. They're not pressing at this moment, but I think in the future, if you do any of that work, it kind of all needs to go together. So there may be will to have this come earlier in a process, but right now we've got it as kind of a third thing, as it helps to really look at the future of building forming the congregation. And then the final phase is really looking at the first and second floor of the education building and dreaming about how that helps to growing the mission and outreach. Really, the first couple of phases are about the outreach to the community and bringing people in and having the ability, for example, with restrooms, to have larger concerts here, to be able to market the church for weddings and have it available to larger crowds on a more routine basis. So this is the 4 phases as we have them broken out. We have the phases as one big phase. We've looked at that that way. We've also looked at a schedule, and in the rough order of magnitude, if we were taking each of these 4 phases, each phase would probably last a year. If you'd start from finishing out construction documents and design development all the way through construction, those tend to last about a year, a little less than a year. If you were to combine it into one big project, that could take another 8 to 9 months in design and construction documents. We're allowing 6 weeks for permitting process, and then construction would last probably a little under 2 years, or for the entire project. So again, I want to say none of this is set in stone. I don't think we're heading off in any direction right now. But if you're trying to imagine the future and how would you do all of these things, this gives you the pieces and the parts and the information that you would need to know what that looks like. I feel like I've gone on long enough. I'd like to open the floor to questions. We have given a draft of our report that came out in, I think we'd sent an updated one in September. We will be finishing that report, bringing in input from today, answering questions as we go along.
And I'll take that one.
Oh, thanks.
We'll just flip that so you see before. You can be a rock star today.
Oh gosh.
There you go. There you go. Hold on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Well, first of all, I think it's all extremely exciting, and I like all of those ideas. I wanted to know if when you address the water issue and getting off the city water, does that also take into account the water pressure problem that we seem to have when the air conditioning is running?
Yes.
Okay.
That is your problem.
Okay.
The problem is, and I'll try to put it as clear as I understand it, is when the water's coming in and you're coming in at like 8 gallons a second, and you have fixtures that aren't able to flush because this water pressure, and that will totally take that demand off of your system so that you'll be able to flush toilets. And if your toilets are updated, then that will help you have more efficient fixtures too. But yes, that really is the solution to that problem.
I was wondering how high does the elevator flood, and how long until the roof will literally crack?
That is an excellent question. We think the roof is in pretty good shape right now. We don't think it's going to crack and fall open anytime soon. It's safe, but it's overstressed. The elevator floods as much as it floods the basement or the first floor of your church, and it's not being pumped. Water's not being pumped out fast enough. So it floods as much as it floods downstairs. Does that make sense? Okay. How's what? Well, that's a great question. It depends on how fast you can pump the water out of the basement once there's been a flood event. Yes. Does your basement flood? Yeah.
Okay, on the third and fourth floor of the education building, you have got rental apartments. Who are we aiming for in renting those? I mean, the general public?
Yes.
What have we done about parking for them?
We don't have any parking identified specifically for them right now. We have the lot that there is now. I'm not sure how that would be managed exactly.
And
Katie might be able to answer.
we do not have to offer parking for downtown residents. One person on our staff currently lives in downtown, and she does not pay for parking as a part of her rent. It's a separate thing that she has to do with the city. So they have parking permits that you can get as a downtown resident. Yeah. Did I see your hand, Libby? Oh.
So I appreciate the plan. I think it's very comprehensive and exciting. I'm not sure I have more comments than questions. I wanted to know, and this is more of an immediate repair than a long-term plan, I think the plumbing was working in conjunction with the existing water requirements for the air conditioning. I think something else has happened in the interim, because this business of not being able to flush toilets or have water pressure, that in my mind that's a new phenomenon. And they did work for a while, not permanently, and now we're having these issues of them backing up. So I wonder if there was, as part of the evaluation, if we discovered that there's something else that's broken along the way. And then the other comment was, I'm gonna have to sleep on that apartment that third and fourth floor issue. That was a bit of a surprise to me. I knew we were looking at maybe a commercial office space or something like that. I didn't think so much about residential, so that's a new thing for me to think about and imagine, I guess.
So I would say too that we talked to real estate people who said there's not as much of a market for offices now. That may be a short-term thing, but in general, in this area, there is not a demand for office. So we
Build
did lay it
and
out.
they may not come.
Right.
Yeah, two-part question. When does the choir room get moved over to this building? Is that in phase one?
That is in phase one.
Okay. Does that mean that the choir room, the roving room, the music library, and all is subject to flooding if it's moved down there?
Yes. Yes, that's a good point. Maybe we need to consider high.
I think we would have to make sure everything in there was off the floor.
Yes. High storage, for sure.
There was a question that came in online from someone about whether we save the native trees in the parking lot.
I think we have saved all the large native trees. There are, I think, two crepe myrtles that I think we have moving away, but that's all that I know to my knowledge. We kept the other trees.
Couple of questions. One is kind of a cosmetic question, but wondering about if signage is included in kind of some of these final phases, about as far as where everything is going to be, and also what was my other question? I'll get back to.
Signage is a minor thing that we can include with this phase, but it's we've included a lot of contingency, not knowing when this is going to have to happen. So signage is a relatively easy thing to incorporate into any of these phases.
This might not have been considered at all, but I was just wondering if there had been any thoughts about removing that building and doing parking and then stuff on top, the offices and things like that, and then that would eliminate the parking problem and the redesign of old to new.
That is a great question, but we were keeping that building because it was built in 1926, and the removal of it may be an issue in the city of Atlanta. We did not go into a design exercise where we looked at that entire block. You may be able to get the parking done a lot better, but in the current new development for Savannah, you need to have street level retail so that you can't just build a parking deck anymore and have the first floor be the parking deck. You've got to have enough room to have commercial on that first floor. So just so long as you could get up to a second level. We did not look at the education building coming down as a part of this exercise. That would be a much bolder thing to do for sure, but we kind of were trying to work with what we had at this point.
While the construction will be going on with the choir loft, and are you envisioning still being able to worship here, or are we going to have to figure out
Probably
something?
not.
Okay.
No, and that's one reason that we bundled the choir loft work with any roof truss work together with any organ restoration, because that would take the organ offline. We would need shoring for this roof work here. This whole reconfiguration would be a construction zone. So that is why that is shown as one phase altogether. But there has been a precedent of you all worshiping at the Mikveh Israel. Yep.
What are the plans for the exterior of the building and the painting?
Of this building?
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. In the first phase, we have fixing the modillions, which are those little rectangular things up at the cornice, and cleaning the building. In the third phase, we have restoring the exterior windows and exterior doors, and those are the components that are painted now. So we can move these pieces and parts around, but we would take all of the exterior work and bring it together with kind of what we would call the emergency exterior work, which are those modillions, if we needed to. But the entire scope is really restoring the windows, painting those, restoring the doors at all levels, restoring all the exterior metal work, fixing the modillions, getting the tiles to make sure we don't have any that are falling off the roof, and fixing the cracks that are currently in this exterior stone. And I think that covers just about all of it.
What do the modillions actually do? Or do they do anything? Are they just decorative?
They're decorative, yes. And the problem is that because of your gutter system on either side, the gutter runs the entire length, and that was leaking, and you have since done an emergency repair that stopped that leaking. But the problem is that those modillions have kind of steel reinforcement in them, and when the water gets into cracks that gets into the steel begins to rust and exfoliate and grow, and then that makes those little modillions crack both ways and then become loose and fall off. So you just don't want those falling off. You've already had one or two already fall off, and many of them are cracked. Yes. For the exterior, for the preservation of the building, yes. You don't want to just go in and mow them off because it'll look like you've got missing teeth. They're actually called dentil, I think, when they're on the interior of the building. I'm not quite sure why. I had to look up why they were called modillions, but it would look funny if you took the ones that were off.
Was any discussion made about changing the tile of the roof to metal?
There was yes. We went through all the paperwork and all the discussions that you've had previously, and we had all those discussions again about should we go back to a metal roof. And the problem is that while you would have to reinforce all the connections in the roof and the metal roof, it would be more difficult to have a metal roof because it would be harder to tie it to your roof structure than it is to just reinforce this one truss for dead loads.
And was there any discussion about solar panels?
Yes, we have those incorporated into one of the phases for the education building. I want to go back to the other roof question though. Because this roof tile has also been here since 1921, it would be more difficult to change that with the city of Savannah and the historic district too. So it was kind of a multi-pronged reason for sticking with the tile. But we did think about it and talk about it a lot.
What considerations have you all made for climate change?
For climate change, well, one big thing are the windows on the education building are currently single pane, and you're losing a lot of insulating value with those windows. While they came in 74, they're not very efficient. You could consider interior storm windows here to a certain extent, although I think it's going to interfere with the shutters. I think the attitude towards the basement of this building, having it be more of a resilience approach rather than trying to stop it, is kind of the attitude. We're going to need to live with some of this stuff rather than trying to change it. But I think increasing insulating values wherever you can, especially in both of these buildings in the attics, making sure that you're not letting air out. We've been also encouraging clients to go more to electrification of all of their systems. So that's a consideration. I think you've got gas in both buildings going to some of those units. And then LED lights, it'd be easy to change all your light bulbs to LED at this point. That's an easy thing to do, but all of our buildings, when we do renovations these days, go straight to LED, and that helps decrease the energy consumption. Henry, did you have another question? How are we going to do weddings here? I think you'll do them just the same way that you do now. We've suggested that you create a bridal suite or a wedding suite that is attractive to people who want to use this as a wedding venue. Some churches have those, some churches don't, but that usually makes it more kind of attractive to people.
Solid. Fran.
I can't.
You got it?
Yes. I'm very impressed with all your plans. I want them all done tomorrow. Okay. But I've been asking for years for the church sanctuary to be more accommodating to people who are in those wheelchairs and power chairs that come up through the elevator. And I've seen it in other churches where half a pew is removed, and that's just a furniture problem. It's not your kind of problem. But I'd just like to say once again that that's something we could do next week. And I'll be in that wheelchair soon enough, and my friend Charlie Waldrop would be right here, and I wish he could just come in his chair and sit right here in the space that might be here for him to sit with his family instead of in the back corner, which is the only place that a power chair can sit now.
And we did have long debates about where to take out half a pew. And it can be wherever you all want it to go.
I don't know anything about HVAC, so this might be an easy question. For something this size, does it have to be a water-based unit?
I'll let Sean take that question.
Because we're trying to solve the water problem, but if
Yeah.
we're on the last legs of our current unit, I don't know how old it is.
It's the most efficient way to heat and cool
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Say no more then.
But with
If we're on the
electric
last
power.
legs of this one and we could do it with a unit that didn't use the water, that would solve.
Yeah, no, go, you know, you've done just as much as I do, and if not more.
There was a question, a comment earlier about the fact that the water system, the chiller, the air conditioning right now is using a lot of domestic water, and then that leads to drop pressure in the bathrooms, but there may have been a point in time where that wasn't as much of an issue. Two things could be contributing to that. One is it's seasonal. When it's hotter outside, the demand for the water and the chiller is a lot more. So you could have, some people are seeing it during the summertime when you go in the bathroom, you're going to have less water pressure because the demand from the chiller is taking up a lot more water. The other thing is over time, pipes corrode and you lose efficiency in those pipes. And so you may just not be getting as much water into the system and through the building as you were at one point in time because of the corrosion that's happened. And sometimes that happens a lot faster, just depending on what type of pipe and what type of water is coming in, if it's filtered water and all those kind of things. So there could be a few things that's leading to that difference in pressure drop that has happened over time. What we have, and I don't want to belabor the mechanical system, but it is an important component to this church because the church is spending a lot of money on the water right now, and it's because it's a tough problem to solve because the easiest thing to do is to put a unit outside. And when a unit is outside, it is using the exterior environment to cool water, to bring cool water back into the building. And it is just that water stays in the system and it goes out and cools down, comes back in and cools you. And it's a constant loop. What you are doing right now is you're taking water from the city that is underground, that is cool water, and that water from the city is coming in and it's cooling the air that's being blown around. And you're paying for that cool water. You don't have anywhere to put a unit outside to cool the water. That's why you're in the situation that you're in. What we are proposing, what the mechanical engineers found, is if we can take one of the rooms downstairs, there is an interior cooling tower that we can put inside the building that would then exhaust and bring air in from outside through one of the windows that you got downstairs. It will take up one of the rooms downstairs, but with the new layout, it would all work well. And it solves the problem from having a cooling tower outside of the building, which we thought we would have to pipe under Whitaker Street and go to your either to the parking lot or to the exterior area behind the education building. And that would be extremely costly. This was definitely the most economical solution and will be, a benefit to other systems in the building as well. It is a problem. You have a pump station, so basically everything flows downhill, and so when you flush a toilet, it usually uses gravity to get out of a building. That's most of what happens. In a building that is below grade, like your basement is, you have to then pump that waste up. And so there is a lift station. It's under a steel plate that's out under the sidewalk at Whitaker Street. It's actually configured well. I mean, it will work. It's not a big issue. Our engineers looked at it and they said this is the best solution for what you're doing. What we would do is during that renovation, basically what you have right now is the reason the bathrooms are stepped is because they just didn't want to take the slab up to get the plumbing under slab. So they just built risers to be able to get that gravity to the pump, to the line that's going out to the pump. So what we are proposing to make it accessible in the renovation is to take all of that out, to actually cut into the slab, do it like you should, go under the slab to the lift station, and then the lift station will pump it out to the city sewer service.
There was a question about the trees in the parking lot earlier. Some of us have noticed when we're here at night that the trees are blocking the lights from the streets, which is a security issue.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering if there's some way either we can cut trees back or add lighting.
I'm sure either way. Yeah. Yeah.
Discuss with the city arborist.
Right. Have to do, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
You submit the plan for why you're doing it and what you would like to do to the city, and then the city would then, you have to get an arborist to confirm that it's not going to be a detriment to the trees, but you can absolutely do that. There's provisions to make that happen. It could be a part of the parking lot project. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
We could add lighting on the side of the building too.
Oh, just one more question about the HVAC. The heating, does it use water from the city as well to circulate hot water? And then the second part of that question is it a closed loop system or does it dump the water?
It dumps the water currently. Yeah. So you're paying for the water, and then you're paying the impact fee for when you send the water back out as well. So it's an open loop system right now. And I apologize. What was the first? The heating. It uses the water in a way that I'm not a mechanical engineer, but there's a process inside of the boiler that it uses that water, and it heats it up, and I think it's using gas to heat the water back to the reheat system. I don't think it's electric. I can't remember exactly what the boiler configuration. It is a gas.
I think so, yeah.
But it uses city water. It brings that city water in. It's a gas boiler, and then it heats it up, and then it just dumps it back out.
I have a question about the housing on the third and fourth floor. I think as a current use, it's excellent, but I'm wondering if it foreshortens our ability as a church to reuse that space should, God willing, we grow that much. So has there been any thought into reconstructing that? Would that be a possibility without great expense, or how did you come about that?
Well, I think you can go back.
Yeah.
Which way?
So we looked at it at least from a construction perspective of a residential area is probably the most dense construction space. It's one of the more expensive construction costs to put in that. So for the cost estimates that you have, that is a worst case scenario. You could do anything you wanted to with those areas, and you wouldn't spend any more money than what has been budgeted for those projects right now. So we looked at, we heard that there was a need to look into potential income streams for the church.
Right.
And so we were just, there's no decision that's been made to do that. It is, we were answering the question of what could the church do to generate income with that space. And the reason it landed on the rental space in this presentation was because it generated the most income, and it appeared to be the most viable, that it would actually work, that you could actually rent those spaces and have that income coming. The business office space was another good idea, but when we were told that there just wasn't a big demand right now for office space downtown, it seemed like it would be a bad thing to present. You could build these office spaces, but then we leave and the church can't rent them out. I mean, that will be a waste of the church's investment in doing that. So we were just presenting what options are out there in a way that if the church was interested in generating income, that it would be a viable option to do that. Oh, yeah, that's right.
John is talking about the Lutheran. Do you want to stand up and say something about the Lutheran Church?
Part of that idea also came from Lutheran Church of the Ascension down the street. They have done that above their fellowship hall and have had success with it. So we were asking them about that. So they rented out through a rental management company called Lucky, and so we've been in contact with them, and that was one of the ideas that was kind of floated around, is that it's already being done by churches.
I would add too that if you feel like you don't need it as rental property anymore, it can be used for other missions of the church, for people who are experiencing homelessness, to use those units as well. There's a lot of mission that can come out of that later on.
I know you all sort of addressed parking, and you talked about, paving the parking lot, and we'd get a few extra spots. I guess I'm just still worried about parking, though. Are we going to try to address that? What is our plan?
We've got an application in with the city to close down McDonough Street between Barnard Street and Whitaker. What that would require of us is to hire an off-duty police officer every week if we wanted to do that, but it would gain us, I think it was 75 spots. It was parking three wide. Oh, that was all the way to Chippewa. Okay, either way, 30 spots-ish that we would gain if we closed it. And that application has already been submitted to the city. A large bit of that work was done by Lamar Davis. Yeah.
Can I ask about that? Is that you temporarily close it on Sundays or any event days? Okay, it's not a permanent closure. Yeah, okay. Just to clarify.
I have 3 questions. Number one, in regard to the bedroom space over in the educational building, has any investigation been done about city fire regulations and cost of increase in insurance for that? And that's question number one. Question number two is, for the last 13 years, I've experienced the downstairs flooding in a very personal way. My office has been flooded probably 6 to 8 times. I noticed that when the cars go by and drive time in the afternoon and there's been a downpour, that it washes over the sidewalk and down the steps on the McDonough Street side. There's literally daylight you can see through the walls. Down if you stand in the hallway, you can look and see outside, and there's a drain at the bottom of those steps. Anything been investigated about enlarging that drain or making it more efficient? And I also heard, and in your assessment, did you find that there was water leakage behind the outer wall, kind of on the inner wall up in this area of the sanctuary?
Okay, so to the first question, if there are living units, we will need to sprinkler the building, the education building. So we did do a code analysis of that and other forms of programs and occupancies that would be there. We did not look at the increased insurance. We only looked at the increased fire safety that would need to be implemented for that.
We included, I think, in the annual income, the income is actually more, but we included a property management fee, which would cover the insurance costs associated with having that just in the income analysis. So the income was actually closer to 200,000. I think what it shows is the annual income of 140 to 60, and that's because you're going to have to pay a property management company for all those additional services. You don't want to be the one that's managing that portion of it. So that was assumed to be part of the difference there.
On the leakage through the windows and doors and existing openings, we cover kind of addressing everything we've got now and making sure that that's all functioning properly. I believe in the second piece of the sanctuary building, which would be the third phase. There is a drain at the bottom of the ramp that needs to be cleaned out for sure, and make sure that that's functioning. I don't think it's functioning very well right now.
Yeah, the thought behind increasing the size of the drain, it definitely you can put a trench drain in, which will keep water from going around it in a fast-moving water pace, like a car splashes it in. If you put a trench drain in, it'll keep that from happening. But it really is limited by the capacity of the lines downstream from it. And so we could increase the footprint of those drains as much as you wanted to, but as soon as the capacity is reached at the lines that are downstream, and the rain is hitting it from every storm sewer and everywhere else, so it really isn't going to do anything more than those lines can hold. So what we included in the proposal was changing those drains to a trench drain system, which will keep water from going around, and it will help some of that, but there's going to be a point at which the city's storm system is just at capacity, and it's just not going to go anywhere except for the least path to resistance, which has been inside of the building. And that's where the resilience, using more resilient flooring, wall surfaces. And we did see the moisture.
Yeah, there is moisture infiltration at the front part of the church underneath the stairs on this upper corner. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that all water that's coming off of downspouts is not kind of going straight into the wall, but we don't have a full waterproofing effort for the bottom because we just don't think it's going to be that beneficial.
There wasn't a lot of evidence of it. It's mainly focused in the front of the building, and a lot, like Karen just said, the water comes down the downspouts, and if they are rusted out, the water goes around it, and when the water goes around it, it tries to get into the building, and that's what it's doing. So you fix the gutter issue, yes, sir, and then it'll help it a lot, and then we'll seal all of that up and repair what's been damaged already.
Do you have a question?
Thank you.
These are all great questions. Thank you, everybody. Should we close this out and kind of, so what is going to happen next? Architects, construction, they're all going to meet and finalize plans based on your feedback today, whatever time of day it is. Nothing is set in stone, as Sean said. And then there will be a time when we will present the final master plan. At that point, we will have to make a decision as a congregation as to how to proceed. No vote is taking place today. No vote needs to take place today because there is no final plan yet. Do you all understand? Does that make sense? Any questions about the process from here?
One other, you heard a question? You have a question? Oh, timeline.
We were just working off of how much feedback we got, and we'll probably have a debrief meeting with you all. We'll get the opportunity for everyone to funnel questions and comments and any further things to you all. I think if people can get feedback in the next couple of weeks to the church, we can process that and wrap up our thing. We're pretty much in a place where we would like to wrap it up. I'd like to make sure that everybody got a copy of kind of an abridged version of the presentation if they wanted one. But we have them up here in case you need one.
So there are a few extras with that. And we wanted you all to know that this is one of the steps. So we have to have a master plan to proceed with the next steps, which would be funding and figuring all these things out and figuring out what we want to do as a congregation. So this is first step in that. And so we look forward to our email addresses. We post them every single Sunday. If you need anything, please let us know, and we'll pass it right along to Karen and to Sean, and then we'll go from there. Are there any other questions we can answer before we close out? Thank you all for being here today and for participating in this. This was a good Founders Day. I really enjoyed the lunch and the time together, and we need more of that together, don't we? This would be good. Well, let's pray real quick, and then we'll call it a day. Loving God, thank you. Amen.